Batman review, take one. Hey, what's happening, guys? So we just got to... No, never mind.
You did,
yeah. We just saw it.
I make Chad sit downstairs in the basement.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome to our review of The Batman. Today is Maple's first time getting a chance to see it. Well, luckily, it just dropped last night, so let's go ahead and get her thoughts. Maple, what'd you think of The Batman? Tell the people. They gotta know.
I actually love this movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like this movie. I think it's... you might give me some shit. In terms of Batman as a character, it's the best Batman I've seen.
I agree. I totally agree.
It's the best Batman I've seen. Maybe, but it's hard because The Dark Knight, I really like that movie, so...
Yeah, but do you like it because of Batman?
No, I like it because of Heath Ledger.
Yeah, and that's what I think, too.
And Joker.
I think this is the first one that gave Batman a lot of time and did him... I don't want to say did Batman really Batman well. Good. Because there's so many ways to do Batman, but I think what they did for Batman, I liked him on screen. I liked what he was doing. Yeah,
it felt less cheesy. Like, he was less cheesy of a character to me, because the other characters, though how he's portrayed are just... And honestly, like, the actor, who's the Dark Knight?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale is actually not a bad actor.
No. He's incredible in some stuff.
Yeah, but for some reason, seeing him in The Dark Knight, I was not sold on his acting.
He partly has not a lot to do anyway. Yeah. So even his best scenes are like, what would you name, you know? Like,
a blurry fight scene.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, especially Batman Begins, yeah. I would say, like, maybe one of his best acting moments is, like, when Rachel dies and he's talking to Alfred, but it's just nothing. There's nothing to it. Yeah. But now you've seen The Prestige, so you know that he can.
The Prestige I was like, oh, this is a whole new... Like, I just hadn't seen him, like, actually feel like he's actually acting. So it was refreshing. This, like, I don't know. Having a Batman that is more of a character and not so much of a caricature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, like I said, I think the other Batmans are a little thin.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's nice about this Batman is it's interesting because he is supposed to be, in theory, kind of a more developed Batman. So the phrase they kept using for promotion for this movie is that this is year 2 Batman. We're skipping the origin story.
Right, which was nice.
Which was nice. But having said that, he feels almost like he's fresher than the Christian Bale Batman. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe that is something that the other Batman was missing, was like Batman, after doing it for 10 minutes, feels like he's kind of just settled in and he's doing all the thing and he's got all the cool gadgets. This Batman felt a lot more raw to me. Like, he was still kind of, you know, a lot of his gear was kind of like...
Like, this is the start of Batman being Batman after the origin. Like, this is him now. Because, Batman Begins kind of does cut Batman off because now he's no longer the white, you know, they've got their white knight. Now he has to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's basically how they end that. So it's kind of like Batman in that universe doesn't really ever get to be Batman. So instead, taking it where Batman is now at the start of him really getting into everything.
Yeah, well, and being, I feel like he feels a lot less technologically advanced than the Nolan Batman.
Right.
Which I kind of like because it makes the stakes feel a little higher of like, is this guy going to succeed? I don't really know. Like, it's kind of, you know.
He felt more like a person.
Mm-hmm. A vigilante guy trying to, like, make this work. But you're always kind of like, uh-oh, I hope this works for him. An example of that, too, was, like, when his, in the Nolan movies, he's got the cape where he's flying around because it's got the super fancy magic rigid, you know, wing technology. Yeah. In this one, he has the squirrel suit.
The squirrel suit.
And, like, that feels more real.
And just how the mannerisms of the character, him stepping up there, for a second, he's like, ooh, like...
Yeah, right.
He's on top of a building where the other Batman probably would have just been like swan dive. And I literally said that. I was like, swan dive. And then he second guessed himself and like took a breath and prepared himself to jump off the side of the building.
Absolutely.
That, to me, is when I was thinking in my head, oh, Batman's a person.
Yes.
He's not just Batman. And in the other movies, Batman is Batman.
Right. It also explains, too, because the other Batman also always talks about how, like, I have to be a symbol. I have to be more than a man. You know, Master Wayne, know your limits. Like, oh, Batman has no limits. This one, I like that they even explained that in a more realistic way. In the opening monologue that he gives about the city, he explains how, like, the bat signal is important, and not just the signal, but who he is as a symbol is important because it shows how like villains double think things that they're gonna do because he might be in the shadow. You know, he's like, everyone kind of thinks I'm everywhere, even though I can only be in one place. So it takes the focus off of the idea that Batman has to go physically punch a bunch of crime in its turkey neck, and more that just because he exists, it's enough to get some people to kind of double, you know, like second guess what they're gonna do,
on what their actions are going to be, and what the consequence potentially could be. He says he is the shadows. Yeah, right. He's not in the shadow. Yeah. He is the shadow.
So his reach is much further than who he can specifically punch at any given time, which I think is really cool. But having said that, he also laments that he feels like he's not doing enough. What are you going to say?
Oh, no, I'm just thinking too, because he also says then at the end how he's not vengeance.
So that's what I was getting into, yeah. Yes. And that's what I liked about this movie, partly a lot of things, but this is one of the things I liked. Batman has been doing the same thing for a million years.
Right.
And it's basically, I am vengeance, which is funny because a lot of people in the comments,
I said, and I think that's what I was thinking, like, but I didn't really know how to explain it. I was like, this movie finally explained, like, what was going on.
Because people in the comments are all like, oh, it's just like Batman's not vengeance in this whole movie. You can't shut up about being vengeance. But
it's
again,
cool that they did that.
It's a different interpretation, though. Not all Batmans are exactly the same guy. Certainly the Mr. Freeze version of Batman's not this guy. But having said that, we've been doing the same thing of like, I'm this orphan kid who basically wants vengeance because, you know, my parents were killed. My favorite interpretation of his parents' death is still from Joker. I love that one.
Yeah.
And this one pushed the character a little forward, in my opinion. Like, we open, and it's a cool opening and closing scene. And the opening scene, it's him going and saving a guy, and then the guy is like, don't hurt me, and he's scared of him because all he's ever shown anybody is that he's this fearsome monster.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, he kind of realizes, like, no, I kind of need to be Superman. And so he goes and helps the lady up into the helicopter, and she doesn't want to let go. And he's changed, and that's
scene,
cool.
too, where he's walking everybody out of the stadium,
I think, or
auditorium, I don't know, arena, stadium, arena is really cool because then now, you know, finally one person reaches their hand back out to him and trusts that maybe he's not just gonna
also it's like
their ass.
Now it's also like break of dawn, and so it's like the sun rises, it rises on Batman, it rises on Gotham, like things can get better. Like, I think all that shit's really dope. So I appreciated that. So how did you feel about the Riddler?
Interesting.
Let's start with this real fast. Do you know anything? Do you have any memory of the Riddler as a Batman villain?
I would just always see like a little cartoon character in my head. Yeah. Black and white stripes. Kind of lanky. Normally green and black. It's normally a green suit with black question marks all over the place. Yeah. Suit. And like a top hat, a cane. For some reason, I think maybe I'm thinking of the Hamburglar.
You just might.
From McDonald's.
You just might. I think they know where he's from.
That might. Do they look similar?
Did you? Not really.
Oh, okay, but I'm getting a morphing of.
Let me pull them up for you. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
You might have seen too, like the Jim Carrey one.
Oh, wow.
In Batman Forever.
Okay.
Which would have been like the movie right before the one you saw.
I don't
with
think
Mr.
I saw
Freeze.
Batman Forever.
Yeah. But generally, yeah, it's this kind of thing. He's like wearing like a bowler hat and he's got question marks all over the place. And so they had to try to figure out how to make him, you know, how do we take this crazy character and
turn him into a serial killer?
Yes, exactly right. Played by, you know, Paul Dano of all people. So yeah, so I'm sorry, I was kind of interruption. So please continue. What were your thoughts on this character?
Yeah, interesting choice of an actor. It's giving me very Lovely Bones.
Okay.
For some reason, when I saw him, I was like, okay, like
thinking like Stanley Tucci from that,
like light-eyed hair kid. I don't know. Like, he wouldn't be someone I would look at and be like, oh, that's a bad guy. Because the whole time I'm like, what the frick does this guy look like?
Yeah.
Like, who could this be? So, interesting. I don't know who this actor is.
Yeah.
In anything else, so. But
he's one of my favorites, but yeah, you haven't seen those movies yet, so that's
I haven't. But it's funny, they make him like this soft, like he looks like a soft, like just nerdy-esque guy, right? With his glasses. And just regular clothes, whatever it may be. Kind of a loner, obviously.
See, I think he has a lot in common with Arthur Fleck. I think that they've tried to portray those two characters kind of that same way, where they're victims of Gotham. So they're not a big, scary, imposing presence. They're like a kind of sad, the kind of person that on first glance you kind of feel bad for.
Right.
And they feel a sense that, well, and that ties into a really great thematic thing, which I think showcases Batman's change.
Right.
Which, again, we have a lot of Batman changing in a franchise that's known for Batman never changing. So I like this idea that Batman has a eureka moment when he's beating up those bad guys in the arena, and they're like, "Who are you?" And the guy says, "I'm vengeance." And you're like, no. And like Batman realizes, like, oh God, like it's the same thing I'm always telling people. Like maybe that's not the right way to think about it. Absolutely. Maybe I'm wrong. And that's exactly how these guys feel too. It's like they feel like they are the downtrodden, underbeaten, you know, from this system that is a super problem. And he thinks that he's Batman basically as much as Batman does. And I think that's the thing that kickstarts Batman to realize that maybe I have the wrong attitude about all this.
Yeah, it's I'm starting to see with all of the villain characters, they all kind of reflect this piece back to himself.
Yes.
They're all a reflection of him in some way. Mm-hmm. It's weird.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting.
It is interesting.
So I really dug that part. So
is that I hope that's intentional. It'd be a cool intentional piece if that's something that
it's been since like the 80s. Like Batman when he started was super goofy. Like every hero was. You know, it's like all this stuff was very like, you know, Batman and the Boy Wonder, like, you know, that kind of crap. And
super buff.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, so like what happened is like kind of in the 80s and stuff is when we started getting into kind of like the Frank Miller time period, and stuff got really, really like kind of gritty and dark. And then also people started thinking about the idea of like, you know, Batman is this kid who like his parents got killed and he's basically gone insane and decided to don like this cowl and go around and like fight crime, trying to kind of save his parents every night, you know, if he can. And so it got into and then the idea as well of like a lot of his villains are like, well, these guys are kind of crazy too, and they always go to Arkham Asylum rather than jail. So it's like, why are they all going to a mental institution? Well, because they're all crazy. So it really started to like Batman became this very, very kind of dark, serious level of storytelling. And half the comics, I mean, from the 80s and 90s, especially the 90s, they're like way darker than anything we've seen in the movies yet either. Yeah. So there's some really, really crazy stuff going on. So
what an interesting revelation for him, though, that he found out more about his parents.
Right. And I did want to get into that. So yeah, what do you have to? You got any thoughts on? Oh, I asked you this before. How do you feel now, having seen 3 interpretations of the Wayne family? Because Joker paints Thomas Wayne to basically be like a stuck-up rich person who just sees himself as an elite. And then the Nolan Dark Knight movies paint him as like this super benevolent billionaire who's just a lovely, wonderful person. Yeah. And now you have this kind of third interpretation. So how do you feel about it and compare and contrast with the other ones?
I feel that this is definitely a blend of both, because I feel the first interpretation, that I saw from Joker is what the family could be trying to avoid in this movie. Is that, you know, they're on their high horse, or, you know, but obviously there's probably things happening behind the scenes. And Joker as well, we get an idea that maybe with all of his money, he's also attempting to cover things up. And so in this movie, you're right, it reconfirms, yes, there was, you know, he was willing to try to cover things up. Yeah,
this one straight calls it out. It doesn't make it ambiguous like Joker did.
No, yeah, and so we see what's actually being done. But his mistake is maybe he's just naive in his way about that, in his attempt to just protect his family. But all of them are. Because everybody, you know, that guy blew his head off because he's trying to protect his family.
And it's that difficulty of like, well, if he's trying to do that and is like working with the mob, then maybe he's a bad guy. But it's also like if this town is so corrupt, it's the only way, and everyone's on the take. Right. And that's kind of always the thing with Gotham, is that like it is a place where just corruption runs from the bottom level to the very top level, and that's why it needs Batman. He is basically the only incorruptible force in a town that is completely corrupt from the ground up. Right. And generally the one exception is like Gordon, but Gordon can only do so much because he's surrounded by a bunch of crooked cops. You know. Right. Even in Batman Begins, he's not the commissioner yet,
Right.
Which famously, that's what he always was, is like, in the cartoons and the comics is Commissioner Gordon. So in the first movie, he's just like a lieutenant or something like that. And he's in the car with the other guy who's like, hey, you going to take a taste? And he's like, no, I don't know. And he's like, makes those other cops kind of nervous when you don't take the taste. And he's like, hey, I ain't no rat. It's like he's kind of lower level still, but he even has to deal with the fact that like it's a funny scene. I don't love the scene. It's really funny. But then later, he becomes the commissioner. He's in charge, but still, it ends up being like Reyes or Ramirez or whatever, who ends up being the one who gives away homie's family. And so or was dirty or whatever, so it's like he's always kind of limited. So Batman's kind of that one factor.
Right.
Another thing about Batman that people have started to comment on, I think Batman's interesting because socially he's starting to become I just triggered half the people in the comments, but socially he's becoming one of the more poorly aged heroes. There's two big reasons. One of them is that he is a billionaire. And it's really hard to get around the idea that Bruce Wayne could do way more for Gotham than Batman ever could.
Yeah.
Like, Gotham has so many issues that a billionaire could do a lot of work to help with. And instead, he chooses to go and punch people every night dressed up like a bat. And so it's kind of like, it's becoming less and less easy to kind of like
I know. Well, there was
make excuses for that.
At the end, when he's talking to Catwoman, he's like, take care of yourself. It's like, fuck you.
Like, you take care of me.
Dude.
You could give me $1 million and you wouldn't miss it. You wouldn't know where it came from.
I would have been like, fuck you. Like,
take care of yourself.
Forget the tension, forget the romance.
Kid. Yeah,
I've been 100%. taking, she's literally been taken care of. Like, if there was one person to help her.
Yeah, right. And again, he could rebuild Arkham from the ground up. He could have a good facility. He could, he could beef up the police's ability to have internal affairs so that they can investigate all these corrupt cops and stuff. And he could just fix so much more as a billionaire who, again, he also tries to express that he kind of doesn't care about the money. So if you don't, then put it to good use.
I know.
You can only punch so many people. And take all that cool Batman gear you have. You could give the police all that Batman gear if you wanted, Not necessarily militarizing the police as perfect exclusion either.
That is true. Not practical at all.
Yeah, that's how you spend your time. At least let Alfred do it when you're out working.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Smeagol came back for Alfred.
I know. He's way older now.
Yeah.
Every time I see him, he's a little bit older.
Actor, yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right, because Smeagol's also in The Prestige. I forgot about that. Yeah, I didn't get to talk to you about that one yet. So yeah, you're seeing a lot of his movies.
I know.
He's not in that many, but you've seen most of them.
I know. I was like, hey.
He's also in Age of Ultron. So you've seen him in he's that guy who gets his arm taken off by Ultron. Yeah, you've seen him in so many movies. That's really funny.
Oh yeah, he is that. Yes, yep. Because that's when I first saw him. That's the first I would have seen him after.
In something else, I think. Yeah.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So funny.
So you've seen him in a lot of his movies.
I was like,
that's really
dude.
That's so funny. So that's one thing that I think has made him age poorly. The other thing that I actually thought this was kind of interesting because I never thought of it before. Someone was saying that they don't like when Batman is very low, kind of powered, I guess is a way to put it, like he is in this movie. Because if he has crazy gadgets and he, all this weird, crazy stuff he has, like in the Nolan movies, then the argument of why he's more effective than the police is because all of his crazy toys that are so cool.
Right.
The problem with having him really kind of low powered, where he has some tech stuff for sure, but a lot of it feels very analog in comparison. He feels, like I said, to me, he comes across as much lower tech than Nolan's Batman, with the one exception being his bat eyes, but everything else feels very analog.
Contacts.
Those felt like it was in the future, but almost everything else feels very from the 80s.
He doesn't, because the disappearing act shit that he does in the other movies, not as present in this movie.
Yeah, I agree, right?
Where it's more a smoke bomb. Okay, smoke grenade, and then he appears out of that. Mm-hmm. Where the other movies, he feels
like he struggles a lot more in this movie. Yeah. It feels like everything is kind of hope this works, Yeah. And he also feels like he kind of is compelled to he makes certain decisions, like going into the club and just choosing to show up as Batman. It's maybe that wasn't the wisest choice, but he's kind of so angry, he's just ready to whoop some ass all the time, so there's that going on. But what this person was saying was that when he's low powered like this, then it's well, there is no obvious reason why he's more effective than the cops, except for that he gets to break your rights. And so it's like, oh, see, if the cops only didn't have to worry about like the Fourth Amendment and like, you know, illegal search and seizure, and they could just like kick your ass without reading your Miranda rights or arresting you or having a warrant to break into your house, then the cops could finally do their job. So it kind of sends this creepy message that like the only difference between Batman and the cops is that he doesn't have to worry about your rights. It's creepy.
And I think too, but Batman is a character. You're saying him being non-corruptible, right? And
yes, that's
then
true.
You add the layer of what the storytelling actually is.
I agree. You have to buy into what the world is also telling you.
Yeah.
You can't take half of it and then ignore the other half. And I completely agree, because it's the same thing with the billionaire thing. I had someone in the live chat who was saying how, like, you know, I don't trust the, you know, Batman at all just because he's a billionaire and I think all billionaires are bad. I'm like, yeah, but you have to buy into what the universe is telling you, which is that Batman is not. You know, and depending on which movie you're watching, the Wayne family wasn't either.
Right.
Because now you've seen 4, and 2 of the 4 have darker pictures to paint about the Wayne family.
Well,
but 2 of them say that, no, they were great. You know, like indisputably great.
Him being inconsiderate of the amount of money that he has could be Batman hating himself for the same reasons that Gotham hates him.
Yeah, he also just kind of came across a little preoccupied to me, you know?
Yeah.
It's like he's just not concerned about being Bruce Wayne ever, which is why we also spend a very little amount of time of him as Bruce Wayne.
Right.
He kind of just is Batman all
and you
day.
even have Riddler pointing out, oh, I get to be the real me when I wear my mask, just like you.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This is the real you. You're really standing in front of me now.
What'd you think of the little Joker cameo there at the end?
I know. Weird.
Kind of funky, right?
Yeah. And they don't really show his face.
No.
You can tell there's something, he's got his thing going on.
There's a deleted scene with the Joker that I feel like I should show you before we move on to comments.
In this movie?
Uh-huh. That they like released separately and like made a big deal out of. And I feel like everyone's going to be like, she has to see it.
All right, let's set it up.
All right, let's do it. All right, everyone. Welcome to our mini review.
Our mini reaction.
Mini reaction.
So meticulous.
Oh, his hands.
Like you've been planning it. He's a nobody. Wants to be somebody.
Yeah.
Masked Avengers.
Oh. Oh.
Wasting my time.
That's not a waste of your time, dude. Oh, man.
You think they deserved it, huh? You think they deserved it.
And that's a great thing to have Batman be insecure about, is that he's not different enough from the villains. You know?
Dude, that's what I'm saying.
Like,
it's such like a reflection of him.
The thing you're the most concerned about, you don't care about his motivation. You're worried that you feel like he deserved it, you know? It's like, yeah, dude. It's like you feel like if you killed people, you would have killed the same people that he killed, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's tough. And like I said, I think probably like the single best line in the movie is him turning that guy over and they're like, who are you? And he's like, I'm vengeance. And you're like, oh, well, I see. I see the error of my ways.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Because I almost expected him to be like, oh, I'm nobody.
Yeah,
or similar to what the Riddler said, you tell me, like, which one I am.
It also feels so... It's funny because it's so good for you as an audience, too, because when Batman says it, you're like, yeah, badass, he's vengeance.
I'm vengeance.
And that guy does it, and even you're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't like it anymore. It's so good.
That's why when I saw the first one, I was like, that man is not vengeance. Like, it was just so confusing to me, because I'm like, vengeance to me is... I don't know.
Well, like I said, too, and I don't think you can compare and contrast the movies.
But it's so cool that this movie was finally like, he is not vengeance. Or he was vengeance.
And he's grown up. Yeah.
And now, maturing is knowing you're not vengeance.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. Youth is thinking you're vengeance, and adulthood is knowing you're not.
Yeah.
No, it's just I think I like the ideas of different interpret. I mean, this is obviously not the same Joker either, so it's like, yeah, maybe in the Nolan universe he is different. But the Nolan universe to me, I think also feels a little bit sterile and clean. I think everything feels a little kind of like just smooth and sharp and soft.
This was very intense.
Gritty,
yeah. Well, and felt closer to Joker in terms of violence.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think violence, I think also the dour tone of Gotham. I would argue that Joker and this movie have Gotham be more of main characters than the Nolan movies.
Yeah.
Gotham itself kind of just feels like a set dressing in the other movies, but in these two, like it really feels like it's a character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being in Gotham is not being in New York. It's not being it's a very specific place.
Yeah, this felt more like Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't being filmed. Like you said, it's not New York. It's not some big city. Yeah. It's Gotham.
Where the Nolan movies, I feel like it just could have taken place in New York. There's nothing really super Gotham about it.
Right.
The only place that they kind of talk about a lot is, I think, the Narrows or something, where that's like the part that kind of looks really crappy. But the rest of it just kind of looks like Wall Street. It's just kind of nice looking. You don't really get it.
Just an average day in New York.
Yeah. And so Joker takes place in 1980. So you have that kind of like also that feel of New York back when it was like the seedy, gross place back in the day. And then this movie takes place in some kind of magical timeline that's impossible. Part of it feels like it's old. Part of it feels like it's in the future, you know?
Yeah, very gothic,
mm-hmm.
eclectic in some way.
Feels very analog in some ways, but then someone's got like weird magic eye, contacts. And so, which I kind of like that you can't like pinpoint it. But so to wrap up real quick, too, on some of the characters, any thoughts on Catwoman or Penguin?
Penguin? Danny DeVito.
It's this guy, Colin Farrell. They put him under a huge amount of makeup.
What the heck?
Yeah, that's Colin Farrell's playing freaking.
What the hell?
It's insane, right? It's like
wild.
Certainly you could find a person. I mean, yeah, so Danny DeVito did play the old Penguin in the Batman one, but, it's still Danny DeVito under there. It's like you just put, a little bit of nose appliances on.
I can only hear Danny DeVito's voice.
Well, now you can see him looking like that.
I've never seen the Penguin before.
So yeah, Penguin is an old school Batman villain. This is him back in like the 60s. And his thing is always like he's a corrupt banker or something like that. So in this interpretation, he's kind of this like, more mob kind of oriented guy. When they did the Young series of like, there's a show called Gotham and it's everybody when they're young and it's Batman when he's like a teenager. And so this was like the young Penguin or whatever. But yeah, I just love like that casting is so insane to me.
Yeah, what the hell? I don't even know who Colin freaking... I don't know who that is.
Well, Colin Farrell's incredible, and I'm going to show you some more of his stuff, too, because he's also one of my favorite actors. He is so good.
Damn.
So, yeah, I just thought that was
insane.
Hilarious.
Also, did they still use practical effects in this movie, or is just CGI getting really good? Oh, no, it's a whole bunch
of practical effects,
okay, cool, because there was
like
some
that road fight? That road chasing?
Yeah, it was crazy. I've never seen anything like that in my life. It was insane. And then he's like, I got you, you psycho. And then his car's just like, he's crazy. Flames. He's like,
I love the part when they're having the conversation beforehand and then he just like turns on the engine and it sounds like a jet is nearby. It's just like this. So the only kind of like little kind of gripes I have, I wanted to like this as much as the Joker. I wanted this to be like my new favorite Batman movie. There was a couple little things that held me back. I think first off, I don't think it deserves its runtime. I think that a lot of the scenes almost throughout the whole movie could have just had little trims on each of them, and all of that together would bring it down like a half an hour. I don't mind long movies. Some of my favorite movies are 3 hours long, but the thing they have in common is I think that they earn every second of it, and this one I just did not feel it earned its welcome. There were a handful of scenes where I was like, yes, there we go, this is a good scene, and then it just keeps going and keeps going.
That might have been why I felt like there was just so much going on. That at times I feel like I do a pretty good job of paying attention to what's happening, but there were times where I was like, what? Or how does this apply? Or I found myself trying to make things applicable in ways that obviously weren't.
I would also counter argue that there was a lot going on.
She's like talking about how she was an orphan. So then I was like, okay, is this supposed to tie back to him being an orphan and why they're going to the orphanage? And does somehow this tie? So there were things that because it was so drawn out that I started to question things. It didn't matter. Nothing was coming back of it. So,
but there was so much that was happening. I mean, you do have like
there's a lot going on.
The Riddler's your main villain. You've got the Falcone guy as the other, kind of main villain. And when his thing gets wrapped up, I almost forgot the Riddler was even a thing.
Yeah, corrupt police, and then you have Penguin,
and then you have like all the different. Now, what I will say though, again, another nice thing about the movie is that one of the shticks of Batman has always been that he's the world's greatest detective. And that has been lost over the years. And he just kind of goes around and punches stuff. So this was cool to see them kind of bring back the detective-y stuff. I thought he felt more investigative-y.
Back in to rip the carpet up, before he rips the carpet up, he's with the Officer Martinez. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what are you doing? And Batman like turns around and just looks at him, and I'm like, he's detecting.
That's exactly what he's doing.
That's so funny that I wouldn't have ever taken Batman as a detective. But he was so good. Like, he did a good job detecting.
So DC Comics, DC means Detective Comics.
Got it.
Back in the day, before superheroes were even a thing, there was comics about like Dick Tracy and detectives and stuff like that. That was kind of the guy you would read about. Ooh, what's Dick Tracy going to do this week?
What is it, Junie B. Jones? That's
maybe.
who I got. She's definitely not DC, but that's my
okay, fair enough.
Detective character.
That was like the Hardy Brothers versus Nancy Drew. It was like one of the two.
Yeah, Nancy Drew. Yeah.
So what happened was, Batman was kind of this like bridging between like that detective-y kind of guy. Oh, but this detective wears a cape and a cowl, and he, and it kind of slowly moved us into what we know now as superheroes. And so, it's nice to see him go, because that's, again, part of his shtick. If he's not going to have superpowers, then what is he doing with his time?
A more violent Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, more violent Scooby-Doo. So part of what he does with his time is he detectives,
He detects.
And so I really appreciate that in this one. I think this one probably does the best job out of all the Batman movies I've seen of actually having him really sitting there and like, hanging out in the Batcave, in his garage, looking through stuff, recording with his eyes so he can go back and look at it again, investigating locations where he may not even run to people just because he's kind of doing a private detective thing. I just thought all the detective work really worked in this movie of bringing that energy back to him.
Yeah.
Because he needs something to do when he's not punching stuff. Like I said, I just would like to have seen the whole thing be a little shorter.
Yeah.
Like my chief example is the Riddler in the when he's being interrogated, when he's talking to Batman. Like that scene, it was like there was a point where I was like, okay, this was great, and then it just kept going and kept going and kept going, and I was like, you're overselling, you're wearing out your welcome. I've already bought the product. Like, stop trying to sell me. You're losing me. So that makes it where it falls a little lower in my ranking than I probably would want it. But if you had to rank the Batman movies you've seen so far, including Joker, what order would you think you'd give them?
Man,
Batman Begins is probably number one.
I don't like Batman Begins. That's not my favorite. That's actually one of the movies that I haven't really liked all that much. It's not bad, but so I'd probably do. Gosh dang it. If we're just looking at Batman and not the evil guys, right? Then I would pick this movie first for Batman.
Okay.
And then I would pick The Dark Knight. And then Batman Begins. And Joker to me would be separate of that list.
See, I'm just saying out of the movies. I'm not saying specifically
just out of the
Batman,
movies? Like, which one would I go back and watch again?
Well, just which one do you think was the best one?
This one so far. Sorry.
Okay, that's 100% allowed. Yeah,
I feel like this one so far.
Okay, great. So this is your favorite Batman movie so far.
I didn't have as many moments where I was like, "This is so corny" or really cheesy, I didn't have to. It didn't take the weight of one really good character to carry the whole movie.
I'm with you on that.
This could have been. Could it be better? Maybe. I think it has its weak points still.
Yeah, I think that there is an edit hiding in this movie that is better. I think I've always said Batman versus Superman. That movie needs a re-edit, and there's probably a better movie hiding in there, but there still are some scenes you don't have at all that you need. Like, you need to change the ending.
Right.
In this movie, I don't think any scene needs to change other than just get like some liposuction. So if you could just come in with a scalpel and just kind of trim the whole movie until you knocked off half an hour to an hour, I think instantly it would be like, oh wow, this movie's so good, and it's very watchable now too. It doesn't feel like a freaking whole afternoon to just watch the dumb movie.
Especially where because I wouldn't think of Batman and think of a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, I mean, and if I did, again, it's got to earn it. Like, it feels like there's a 2-hour movie that was bloated to a 3-hour movie, and that's the problem I had with it. But for my rank structure, mine's more awkward because it's like I am disappointed by how much I thought this was going to be like the best movie I ever saw, and it was like, yeah, it was good. So it's easily Joker still. I still think Joker kicks the crap out of this movie.
Ass.
And then,
but Joker to me is so its own thing.
The reason I don't want to break it into like, well, that's a Joker movie and that's a Batman movie is because I don't think Batman's good in almost any of them. So I can't really count it because Dark Knight to me is also a Joker movie.
Dark Knight is,
so it's just kind of a, Batman universe movies.
So you have Joker and then obviously Dark Knight.
Well, that's the problem, is that like it's hard because that's what happened with it. Dark Knight and the Batman ended up where it's like the parts that the Batman did better than the Dark Knight were the things I was expecting it to, that I wanted it. I love the atmosphere. I love the just like that dark and down to earth, very serious, hyper, take itself very serious kind of thing. But it's like the Dark Knight, it's way more concise. It moves, that screenplay like gets to where it's going. I think it has some of that Nolan-y cleverness that you probably felt from The Prestige. It's like all the weird trickster stuff that the Joker does throughout the movie is very plot interesting conceptually. It's like, oh, he planned on this and he did this and this was for this and this was blah, blah, blah. A lot of that was really interesting, where the Riddler, I think, was a little simpler.
Yeah, it's just a serial killer.
In essence, yeah.
Like he's just...
And his riddles are kind of like not that interesting.
Yeah.
Like they're things Batman can just guess in a room. You know?
Right, like it's almost like they could have just stuck with the killings. Like the murder was more interesting than the riddle itself. Right. You could have just killed all these people.
It's very true. And also, the Riddler should be more of a schemer than the Joker. The Joker is supposed to be a little bit more of a chaotic energy, and the Riddler is supposed to be that one who's like, riddle me this, Batman, so he's supposed to be this. So I think they could have beefed that up a little bit. And so it's like, and then of course, like just the Heath Ledger performance is like, just really carries that whole movie. But I don't like the Batman better than I like this Batman. I think Pattinson is probably my new favorite Batman. So it's very, and then also Alfred, like I really love Michael Caine's Alfred. So it really puts me in this kind of weird spot between those two movies. I don't have a clear winner between the two.
Throwing us around.
They both have things that I would change about them. So it's very interesting. But the thing that definitely stands true is that Batman Begins is not very good.
We should just morph. Yeah, Batman Begins.
I don't like that movie, man.
Will never age well. Unless it just gets turned into the best meme you could ever think of.
Yeah, I think all the memes still come from the second one anyway. Oh, no, the third one. I lied. The Dark Knight Rises is mad memes. It's memes for days. Yeah, memes for days.
I should just watch that one for the meme factor.
You could. You probably would recognize some of them.
Just to be culturally relevant.
You'd probably be surprised at how many you recognized. Yeah. Okay, guys. So, cool. Yeah. Both of us really like the movie. I do think it's one of the best Batman movies ever made. And let us know your thoughts in the movie as well. I'll hopefully talk to you guys later in the comments. Check you out later. Bye.
Bye. Adios, brochachos.